All right, today we're going to try and crack the code on one of the biggest puzzles in global business. How do you actually win in the world's emerging markets? Because as you'll see, the old rules just don't apply. We're going to need a whole new playbook.
You know, it's a really fascinating paradox when you think about it. You have these massive companies, right? Decades of success, huge R&D budgets, the best talent, and they go into these markets that are set for explosive growth. And then they just fall flat. And it's not a one-off thing. It's a pattern we see over and over. So what are they getting so wrong?
Well, to find the answer, we first have to really understand the terrain. We're talking about emerging markets, or EMs. And it's not just about a different language or a different currency. The entire strategic landscape is fundamentally different from what most big multinational corporations are used to.
What I love about this is that it gets past that simple story of just rapid growth. We're talking about an environment where the actual rules of the game can change overnight. That's what we mean by institutional volatility. It's a place where just getting your product from a factory to a customer is a massive challenge, because of infrastructure gaps or a totally fragmented distribution system. And a lot of the essential tools for business, like reliable credit markets or even agencies to find talent, they're often super weak or just don't exist.
And this really works both ways. It's not just foreign companies struggling to get in. Firms that come from these markets face their own set of hurdles when they try to go global. They have what academics call a liability of emergingness, which is just a fancy way of saying they have a built-in credibility gap. This tells you the entire system is just operating on a different set of assumptions.
So what's the master key here? What unlocks this whole puzzle? It's not just about better logistics or clever marketing. No, it's something much, much deeper. It's all about understanding the invisible rules that are really running the show.
And that master key is the idea of institutions. In a business sense, this just means the rules of the game, all the things that structure how people and companies interact with each other. But here's where it gets really interesting. See, these rules really come in two flavors. You've got your formal, written-down rules, the laws, the contracts, the official regulations. But then you have the informal rules, the unwritten stuff. We're talking about cultural norms, the importance of social networks, and what's actually considered ethical. It's how business really gets done.
And this, right here, is the core insight. In so many emerging markets, being able to navigate those unwritten, informal rules is way more critical for success than just following the official laws. Understanding the culture of trust and who you know can be a lot more valuable than having a perfectly written, ironclad contract.
This whole reality creates something called institutional voids. Okay, so imagine trying to do business in a city, but there are no reliable banks to get credit, no specialized law firms to draft contracts, and no trustworthy system to even enforce those contracts. That's an institutional void. It's not just that the game is different, it's that key pieces of the game board are literally missing. The winning firms have to figure out how to play around those gaps or even build the pieces themselves.
So if the game board is this different, you just can't use the same old playbook. It won't work. You need a completely new set of strategies, ones that are designed specifically for this unique environment.
And this slide just captures that strategic shift perfectly. The traditional Uppsala model, that was all about taking these slow, cautious steps to reduce your risk over a long period of time. But now, look at the strategies that were born from emerging markets. The springboard idea isn't about caution. It's about making these bold, rapid leaps to buy critical assets. Think of a Chinese company buying a famous German engineering firm, not just for the revenue, but for the brand, the tech, the legitimacy. And the LLL model, that's all about speed. You link into global networks, you leverage partners, and you learn as fast as you possibly can. It's a completely different mindset.
And here's what that traditional model looks like. It's a slow, predictable climb. You start by just dipping your toe in the water, maybe with a few exports. Then you hire an agent. Then maybe you set up a sales office. This process could take decades. Firms from emerging markets often don't have that kind of time. They have to jump steps.
Okay, so let's bring these big ideas down to earth. How does all this actually change how a company thinks about its global value chain? The real-world business of making and selling things.
Well, if you're a strategist, you've got to ask some really tough questions. Like, are we just a low-cost manufacturer, or are we actually capturing value in design and branding? How do we upgrade our role? Not just make a process a little more efficient, but maybe take on entirely new functions. And given all those infrastructure gaps we talked about, is our supply chain actually resilient enough to handle a shock? These are genuine survival questions.
Of course, operating in this kind of environment means you are dealing with constant uncertainty. And the best firms, they don't just cross their fingers and hope for the best. No, they build their strategies to manage risk and navigate all the complex ethical pressures head-on.
And this is exactly how it's done. It's all about moving from just listing your risks to actively designing a strategy to fight them. So you don't just write political risk on a slide, you mitigate it by forming a joint venture with a really well-connected local partner. You don't just worry about logistical nightmares, you build redundancy right into your supply chain. For every major risk, there has to be a deliberate, strategic response.
And that proactive mindset absolutely has to apply to ethics, too. These issues, everything from labor standards to corruption, they aren't just footnotes in a report. They can literally determine whether you get access to a market, whether investors will back you, and whether your customers will ever trust you. They are core to your strategy, period. So if there's one thing to take away, it's this. The old playbook was all about minimizing risk. The new playbook is about building the capability to navigate it. It's a huge shift from a defensive crouch to a much more dynamic, forward-leaning stance.
Which really leaves us with a final, pretty powerful question to think about. As more and more of the world's economic growth comes from these complex markets, is the single most important skill for any global company the ability to understand and adapt to all these different rules of the game? Is that what's going to separate the winners from the losers in the 21st century?